pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Ms. Holt is going to get us started today, but before we do, I'm going to ask if we have any preliminary public comment. We will have public comment at the end and obviously discussion. This tends to be sort of a free-ranging conversation. But anything before we get started?
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. It'll be, actually good, that's over. For the small amount of time we've had to look at the overhead, I just want to make a couple comments. I was doing some myself. I was trying to stay, I purposely stayed away from the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 7th ward because I wasn't sure what the consensus was going to be, how to handle the educational institutions, and 5th didn't change at all. So I did a little on the 6th, but mostly on the 3rd. But I was dealing with residents and not voting population, a registered voter, which is obviously what this is more based on. So this is the alternate plan for some of these districts. And actually, this is one that I had done where it was, that's South Aberdeen, but it also takes into account all of the district that's, the ward that's above Lancaster Avenue. That makes a lot more sense than what looks like the drunkenly drawn map before that was probably reminiscent from, as Amanda was saying, perhaps from even congressional or other boundaries from that. So that to me looks good for Ward 3. What I'd also like, a couple of suggestions, and I know this will get into it, but I figured I'd throw this out before Amanda went up. In terms of the polling places, I know Jake has talked about using Wayne Elementary School for both precincts, or whatever precincts are in, but presumably two there perhaps. And so for Ward 3, I'd like to consider the alternates to Sulpizio and St. Mary's. Sulpizio, one is it's not as accessible. That's a long walk from the parking lot there in terms of perhaps handicapped accessibility, and also the board knows that perhaps its viability and maintainability might be come into question sometime down the line. That's always a discussion. And then St. Mary's. So my suggestions is, if Ward 6 is moving out of the library, is that Ward 3 use the library as one of its polling places. And then the other, depending upon logistics, Radnor Middle School. Again, both within 2 blocks of each other, just like the current ones are, so it's not a big deal if somebody goes to one and they thought they were to the other. And given what I said before about that drunken line, I know Jack would like to keep as many folks voting at the same place as possible. I think we need to correct some of the anomalies from the past, and as long as the polling places are either in the exact same location, like they might be in Ward 6, or again within 2 blocks of each other, I don't think that's as big a deal. So I'd like to throw out those 2 recommendations for polling places, the library, for Ward 3, the library, and Radnor Middle School in lieu of the others, and put my endorsement, unless the board wants to do something specific for Villanova there with the few, under 50 or whatever there might be, then that break up the precincts looks good to me for Ward 3. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ebony Gilly. I'm a resident of the Highland Avenue Avenue, I'm sorry. I've been there for 15 years. My family has been here since 1934, so I work in Villanova, so I'm a community member. I wanted to propose a polling location for Ward 6. I'm speaking on behalf of the president of the Radnor Township Civic Association, the RTCA. We'd like to propose that site. I'm going to read a letter from our president, Howard Childs. The Radnor Township Civic Association understands the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners Subcommittee for Ward Redistricting will hold a public meeting today to discuss precinct lines, take public comment, and discuss other matters regarding the redistricting process. The RTCA Board of Directors requests that this written memo be entered as a public comment during this meeting. The RTCA is a nonprofit, predominantly African-American, maintained civic association located on Highland Avenue in Radnor Township, currently in Ward 6. As the president of the RTCA board, a pastor of the Second Baptist Church next door to the RTCA, and a longtime resident of the polling places in Radnor, current resident of Ward 6, I strongly urge the commissioners to name the RTCA as one of the polling places in Radnor Township. At present, the polling place for the residents of Highland Avenue neighborhood is at the Radnor Township building on Ivan Avenue, which is in Ward 3. This is not close or convenient location for many of our residents, particularly those who are senior citizens and may not drive. The RTCA building is conveniently located in Ward 6, has been completely renovated and is handicapped accessible via a ramp. Parking, including handicapped parking spaces available on the street, and just behind the RTCA is a lot used for Odoricio Park. As citizens committed to the idea that all registered voters should have easy access to the ballot, the members of the RTCA board firmly believe that the RTCA is an ideal location for a polling place. The RTC board gives its strong support to naming RTCA as a polling location in Radnor Township. So best regards, the Radnor Township Civic Association Board for Howard Childs. And I have a letter. I don't know if I should give it to you now or email it to you or.
We don't have a record as such.
Okay.
Give us a letter, we'll read it.
Okay.
Email it to us. It's easier for us to pass it on to our colleagues.
Okay. Thank you.
Be given an opportunity to enter into the record. We just don't have it.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. Ken Batchelor, Superintendent of Radnor Township School District. Thank you for having this meeting tonight. I wanted to come on behalf of the administration of Radnor Township School District just to talk about polling sites. As a school district, we are always thrilled and happy to partner with our community and support our community. We believe the public schools here in Radnor are here not only for our students, but for our entire community. That being said, one of the challenges we have as a school district is that years ago, when we were identified as a polling site, I think schools were open on those days. Now, when we have elections and during primary day and on election day in May, school is closed. And it is a challenge for us as a school for those Tuesdays. They're not ideal timings to all of a sudden have school be closed for a break. 3 of our buildings are currently used as polling locations, and because 3 of the buildings are closed, the whole district is closed on those days. I come to you tonight just to share with you that challenge as we look at our school calendar. Every minute, literally every hour counts for us. Obviously, every day counts for us. If it turned out that there was a committee looking at this and said, oh, there are other locations that work just as well. For instance, Radnor High School is used as a polling location right now, and we're closed on that day. If there's a location that is maybe a new facility that's across the street that could actually work better as a polling location. If there are alternatives that could work just as well, as a school district administration, we would appreciate that because then we would plan to have school on those days. And I think many of our community members and families would appreciate that. As we look at the challenges with our school calendar, as we look at the inclusivity of our school calendar, we're looking at actually adding additional days as our community changes and grows. We're looking to add more holidays to our school calendar to reflect the makeup of our community. Every single day counts, and those 2 days that we're off for primary day and election day would be days in if we weren't polling locations. Again, we're happy to be partners with the township and want to work with the township, but just wanted to share that as this meeting progresses and as you look at locations. If there's anything we can do to answer questions or help, we're happy to be there. The other piece I just wanted to also mention is Ithan Elementary is another polling location out of the 3 buildings used, and we're about to, we've hired an architect and we're looking at rebuilding Ithan Elementary. So no matter what, we will have a challenge with Ithan Elementary in the coming years. So thank you. Thank you for letting me come and speak to the group.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hallie Ammons. I'm the Assistant Director for Government and Community Relations at Villanova. Thank you for holding this meeting tonight. I just want to briefly say, and I believe I've expressed this to the subcommittee previously, Villanova is requesting, I guess for lack of a better word, but we are interested in hosting a polling place on campus. Our preference for that polling place would be at the Mullen Center at the intersection of Lancaster and Ithan Avenues. It's a centrally located, large, accessible facility with ample parking directly adjacent to the building. We believe this would be an ideal site for many of our on-campus students to vote, and of course, residents in the surrounding area. Looking forward to the discussion and just wanted to add that input. Sure.
Have you had a chance to look at the proposed ward maps, specifically with respect to Ward 7? The precinct maps, I should say.
No, I don't believe I have. I have not seen those yet.
Let me, if I could, hand you a tablet.
Sure.
And ask you if you could just take a quick look. Is there anything that has Villanova students in the example that has a Ward 7 with 3 precincts that has any Villanova students in Ward 1?
So here?
Yeah, the deeper purple area.
So yes, I believe this would contain the South Campus residence halls, I believe. So here's the stadium, and I hope I have my orientation right. Although, you know what, I might not. The South Campus, I'm sorry, the South Campus residence halls, they are off of Ithan Avenue. And that, I believe, is primarily here. I don't believe that there are residence halls here, and I can check on my laptop just to be doubly sure, but I'm fairly certain that's where our South Campus residence halls are.
Got it. So it sounds like then that in the map that has 7P3, all of Villanova's students in Ward 7 would be in that 7P3?
Yes, I believe so, and I will double check.
Okay, I'd be grateful if you could.
Yes, yeah. And is that available on, where can I see this?
I think that's on the township website.
It's on the township website? All right, I'll find it. I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do we have any additional public comment? Hearing none. Ms. Holt, you are up.
Well, thank you for having me back again. So there's limited time to review this, so maybe it's not as thorough as some of the other things I've done. So this is an overview of our precincts and polling places. And just as a point of reference, this can be more subjective of a process than perhaps the drawing of ward boundaries, because one of the things that is sort of the most important thing to remember is you're wanting to do things that are in the public interest. So the law talks about wanting to create precincts and polling places that would serve the public interest, and that seems to be the overarching objective, which can be a rather subjective sometimes, because what serves the public interest can mean different things. So there are quote-unquote rules which sometimes serve as guidelines, like they give the number of voters they recommend for each precinct, and while that's a fixed range and it's not supposed to exceed 1,200 voters, in practice throughout the state of Pennsylvania you'll find many precincts that are far larger than 1,200 voters. So in conversation here I would treat that more as a guideline a little bit. Also to keep in mind that the precincts are the primary decision that needs made, if you will, because the boundaries are what they have to know. Polling places are much easier to change throughout time without having to re-change the precinct boundaries. You can reassign people to different polling places, and that's not, you know, as big of an issue, let's say. So just to keep that in mind, and each polling place has a minimum of 5 workers. So when you establish a new polling place, there has to be at least 5 poll workers there. So that can be a practical consideration sometimes in determining whether you want to add a new polling location or not, or add a new precinct, I should say. And then polling places are to be in preferably public buildings is what the law talks about. They're to be free from intimidation and violence, and they're also supposed to be ADA compliant so that they are accessible to everyone. We don't want to hinder people from coming out to vote because they can't get in the door of the building. So I provided a little chart with voter counts, and the voter counts, we did our best to try to map out the registered voters with the census block numbers, but particularly on the Villanova campus, it was difficult to make sure we had everyone exactly where they're supposed to be. So we kind of guessed it's about 96% accurate. So there may need to be some adjustments there. And so for point of reference, I gave what the current voter totals are per precinct. So you have that sort of as a point of reference of where we're starting from. These are under the old boundaries. And then you'll see as we go along here, I sort of gave a baseline option that had minimum changes and then an alternate option that provided some more changes. They are interchangeable and one's not necessarily being recommended over the other. Once again, a lot depends on what you all determine and what the conversation here determines to be in the public interest. So I'll just start by showing the some examples here.
Could I ask a quick question before you move
Yeah.
on? If you have two precincts voting at the same polling place, can
Yes.
they share personnel?
No.
Like, could 5 people, because
No.
I know 3 are my precinct 2-1 and 2-3 are both at the high school and share the personnel.
You can have the same judge of elections for 2, I think. You can have the same judge of elections for 2, I think.
I haven't seen it be done before, but
I'm from Montgomery County, and I do poll watching, and yes, we have 2 or 3 precincts in the same polling place,
With one judge of elections?
and we don't have 5 per each, no, we don't.
Can we pass this back?
sure.
You're providing good information. We have a floating microphone. We can't hear you on TV if you don't use it.
Okay, first of all, let me introduce myself. I am Pam Deans, and I am the secretary of the Radnor Township Civic Association, and that is why I am here. I reside in Whitpain, no longer in Whitpain. I am in White Marsh Township, and I have poll watched for many, many years, and we have 3 precincts that vote at the same polling place, and we don't have 5 people per precinct at all. We have 2 at each table, and that's how we, and then the voter of elections oversees all 3.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you very much for that.
So once again, in practice, things can be a little different than what the law says. Because each precinct is eligible to elect their own judge of elections, inspector of elections, majority and minority inspector of elections, for sure. And then generally there's a clerk and someone to operate some things. But as was shared, that is not always the case. So, with nothing else on that and I should say that the polling locations do not have to be within the voting precincts either. I mean, it's recommended and it's preferred, of course, but many in Radnor are not currently voting in their polling places not within their ward. So even if with the changes polling places are no longer within the ward, it wouldn't be something that would need to be changed right away for that reason. You could still continue on with where people are used to voting. Okay, so this is sort of a baseline option with some minimal changes. I'll just start here at the top. So Ward 1 lost some people here in the ward changes, but otherwise this is the boundary of Ward 1. It didn't add anyone to Ward 1, Precinct 1. Ward 1, Precinct 2, there's a few fewer voters here because this portion down here was moved into Ward 3. And then this 1-3, the Ward 1 Precinct 3, contains a portion that used to be part of, I think it's Eastern University, which is 2-3, as well as a portion that was in 2-1. And that was combined together. So that would be one route to go with that. In 2, the number of voters, you'll see, I should maybe leave this part up so you can see that. In 2-1, it just combined everything that wasn't in Villanova together, and you'll see later on there's sort of 2 options for the Villanova area. And so it used to be 2 precinct 1 and 2 are now just in 1 precinct, and it didn't seem to be an issue with the quantity of voters. And then there's the new Villanova one, and you'll see another option on the alternate for that. 3 is sort of left as it is, with 3-1 picking up some of the new voters here, or the new area, and then 3-2 picking up the other portion that was newer here. 4-1 picked up new, there's like the new portion up here that was not in Ward 1 previously, or Ward 4 previously, that had been in 3 and was moved into 4-2, but 4-1 didn't change at all. Nothing in 5 changed, and 6-1 has some fewer voters because it used to come out here a little bit, and now that is in Ward 3. But 6-2 did not change at all. And then in this option, 7-1 and 7-2, there was a little change, I think, at the top of 7-2 here in adding in some portion, and they both, 7-1 and 7-2, each lost a few people at the top in the reconfiguration of ward boundaries, so it didn't really add anything too much to that. So that would be like a minimal change approach to take to it, and we can look at them each in more detail here, but just to give you a big picture overview. And then here, there would be other options to look at, and I'll look at these as we go through them individually so you can kind of see, you know, what the maintain option is and what the difference is for each of the different options. So this is Ward 1, and there's sort of 2 approaches I would say you could take to this. Either you can sort of maintain what they have now, which is keeping Ward 1, Precinct 1 together like it is, and that's the same in both of them. The change would be in whether you want to leave 2 different precincts, Precinct 2 and Precinct 3 as separate, or whether you'd want to combine them into just 1 precinct. Combining them to 1 precinct is even pretty close to the cap there at 1,200 voters, so it wouldn't be too large even under more strict interpretation of the law. But it is certainly possible to leave them as 2 different precincts. So, you know, the question to be asking yourself, once again, what's in the public interest? Is it in the public interest to have 2 locations, or would it be better served by just having the 1? So, 2 here, looking at the Villanova area, this would definitely just be Villanova students. If you come up further, this is going all the way up to the inn up here at the top, so to include that, which includes students, but in doing so, you're going to include a few people here that are not Villanova students in the campus. And this boundary is less defined. They normally like to have really defined boundaries that are clearly visible, and this is less visible. And I'm following with Hallie to see if this follows like the campus property line or something that you could use to define it. But you could go up further, and it doesn't significantly change the number of registered voters in the precinct. So it wouldn't be something to do based on, you know, the number of voters you have. It's really a matter of, are you okay with some voters voting in this Villanova campus who aren't students? And, you know, is it better to have it come up a little further to capture all of those? So that's sort of what you're looking at with Ward 2.
I'm sorry, I got so deep into the map, I missed that. Is there an option in Ward 2 where it's exclusively Villanova voters who vote on Villanova's campus?
That's what this, well, so this is just Villanova students for sure. This is using is it Spring Mill Road as the boundary. This comes up further, and it's mostly Villanova students, but there's a small, like a couple streets that include some people who are not Villanova students.
Is there an option in the middle, or is this just?
No, this is just, because it's, the people that are not Villanova students are bounded by Villanova students.
Got it.
So you couldn't, unless the county will let us create an island. I don't know how far we can stretch some of these rules. So, yeah. So that's how that one works. So unfortunately, I did look at that, but it was, yeah, not possible.
And how many Villanova students, if you are different between the maintain and the change? Like,
Oh,
does that arm that goes up, is that a lot? I mean, I don't know how many of those are students.
let me look.
It would be too bad to have some students.
Yeah, where are the students who are in? I'm looking on the davesredistricting.org.
That doesn't include the voter population there.
Understood. I'm just looking at the map and trying to figure out what dorm it is.
Oh, Hallie would be maybe able to better to speak to specifically what dorms are up there. But there are like maybe 70 possibly students or 63 students.
You should ask Amanda.
The mic, whoops.
This is going to be a lot of
Or
trouble.
here, do you want to come up here and
Do you
do
want me
it?
to go over there?
Yeah, that's much
Yeah.
better. And you can put everything down on the table. And fair enough.
Well, I'm looking at my map, and I can kind of tell you where. Okay. So,
And you'll need the mic.
so.
Or do you want to set it up here? Is that easier?
I'll put this down, so maybe I can point it back and get oriented. Okay, so in the dark green area, so here's the inn, and then between Wistar Road and the inn, this is where non-Villanova residents are, just Radnor Township residents. And then in here, this is where you see, is this where you're at? This is where the residence halls are. So what am I looking at? Here's Spring Mill Road.
Mill, yeah.
So above Spring Mill, this is where, I believe this is St. Clair, this is West Campus residence halls. And St. Mary Hall here. So these are residence halls. This is residence halls. And then down here, this is the law school. And then all in here, this is main campus. And in this portion, that's the Commons and the Mullen Center. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take back all of my devices. Okay.
Thank you. Can we all just take a moment to be glad that my daughter doesn't have any weird and embarrassing tabs up on my tablet? My Little Pony did not make an appearance.
Are we ready to move on to 3? Okay. So, so the maintain option of 3 includes the, so this area over here in this little triangle is new to Ward 3, and it just added that to 3-1, or Precinct 1 within 3, and this is part of now Precinct 2 within 3. But this is kind of an odd dividing line between the two. So I wasn't sure the rationale behind if that was serving some particular purpose or trying to capture a particular community of people. If not, it may make sense to, even though it would require changing, you know, more people would experience change to sort of clean up the lines, if you will, and make them a little more compact. So that's what's proposed here. It doesn't really impact the number of voters in each precinct. It's more about just making it more compact. And whether that would be less confusing to voters or not, was the thought behind that. So that's what that one is. So 4, 5, and 6, the only reason for the change is if there would be an issue with the quantity of voters coming out, that the public interest would be better served by adding another precinct. So you could leave them as just the 2 precincts that are there today, with precinct number 2 in Ward 4 growing larger than it had been because of the new voters being added in. Or you could try to target closer to like the 1,200 voter mark and sort of carve out that new portion being added in plus a little more as a new precinct. When I spoke with the commissioner who represents Ward 4, they didn't seem to see any issues with, you know, the flow of voters necessarily that are there today. So I'm not sure that, you know, the public interest would necessarily be served by creating a 3rd precinct. Right now, they even all vote at the same building, as was mentioned earlier. So I'm not sure they're going to be closer to their polling location either, unless, of course, that gets changed. So that's what the 2 differences are here. And the same thing with Ward 5. While these ward boundaries didn't change at all, you can see that 5-2 is grown larger over time, and so you could split them into 3 precincts that are about the same size. But if there aren't any issues with, you know, access to voting, it may serve the public interest more to not disrupt where they're used to going to vote and create voter confusion by, you know, creating a 3rd precinct. And I did speak to the commissioner in Ward 5, and they indicated that there haven't been any issues that they were aware of. So I'm not sure that there would be a reason to necessarily add a 3rd precinct unless you all were aware of something. And Ward 6, it was the same thing. Precinct 1 is the larger of the 2 precincts, and it was reduced in size slightly because some of the portion of the population went into Ward 3. But you could make 3 precincts that are about the 1,200 person mark, but once again, in conversations, I don't know that necessarily the public interest would be served by having 3, you know, precincts. It may be fine to leave them at 2. There was discussion about possibly moving this precinct 1 in Ward 6 down to be along this road, which is, I think, Maplewood, is it? And that would increase the size. It would essentially be these 2 together, so you can see it would be like 2,200 people. Not necessarily like insurmountable, but generally, I would say they aren't looking for precincts to increase in size. So there may be an issue with that, but it was certainly something that could be considered and asked for if we feel like it would be better for the public to have the boundary there. And lastly, we have Ward 7. So Ward 1, or Precinct 1, lost and gained people, so it didn't really change too much in its population. I did try to carve out the South Campus here. Now, when we charted out the voters, I mentioned we had trouble placing Villanova students from the voter counts exactly where they are, so it's showing there weren't any, but there may be some there. I do know that having a smaller precinct, though, it was mentioned, and we'll get into this a little more, there was a community forum that was held back in 2019, which discussed issues with polling locations and access to polls, and they talked about the Eastern University campus being problematic just because it was so small. Now, if they would allow shared poll workers maybe, and you wouldn't have to be setting up all new, but you might only be having 10 people come out to vote.
I would bet you dollars to donuts that Villanova would ensure that that location was staffed.
So yes. So not saying we shouldn't do it or whatever, but just pointing out that there might be few voters that come out, and that was raised as a concern at Eastern Campus.
But it's technically over the 100.
It probably would be. Like I said, it's a little hard to tell because we couldn't quite get it down to be precise, but I would assume there would be. So that's sort of an overview of the precincts. I don't know if you want to pause there before we go on to polling places. So just kind of to recap maybe what you just saw here.
Yeah, why don't we, since it's 7:39, we're getting on in time, I'm going to suggest, why don't we run quickly through, I'll ask if there's any comment from the dais or the public on the polling places,
Okay.
sorry, on the precinct
Yep.
locations that you proposed, and then we can move on to polling places, which I think is going to be of more import to most people.
Yep.
Ward 1, I'm going to say that I think that the change where we have sort of mega second precinct looks fine to me. Ward 2? Your opinion's worth more than mine.
Yeah, I think I prefer all the Villanova students in one place, as long as Villanova wouldn't mind those, not civilians, but
Yes.
non-student populations voting on their campus. I would be fine with that. So you take that boundary to whatever that nebulous line is. Some of it's Matson Ford Road, up to the inn at Villanova. And those few people that are on Wistar would have to vote on campus.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to Ward 3. I had the question, is there some reason that we cannot take that little box that's on the tail of Ward 3, which is the only one that has Villanova students in it, and make it Ward 3-3?
We could try. I didn't find there were any, once again, it was hard to find these Villanova students who didn't show up that there were any voters there. Not to say that there aren't, but we could certainly see about that. And if we did, it would be that little piece, yes. That would be a separate one. So we could certainly see about that, but voter registration would have to confirm that there are. And if there weren't, then we could just merge it into 3-2, or if there are too few.
Yeah, I would like to ask if we could make that 3-3. I know that we can go less than 100 for good cause shown.
Yep.
And my suggestion would be that historically the campus has been whacked up in such a way that voter registration is difficult for the students to maintain. Even if ultimately there are fewer than 100 registered electors at that location, I suspect that when they get properly motivated, they might get more than 100 at that location. And in any event, it just makes sense for all of Villanova to vote on Villanova's campus as opposed to asking a small subsection to go elsewhere. So either way, I feel like we have good cause. And the worst case scenario is we're right back where we are right now. So
Yes.
no harm, no foul.
Yep.
So they would also, if the 3-3, would vote at the Mullen Center as well.
That would be
So
my
it-
suggestion.
Yeah, me too.
And on Ward 3, are we recommending we maintain or change?
I would change. I think it looks a little
Okay,
wonky.
I agree. It goes back to our criteria of having, as much boxed precincts, wards as possible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, come on up.
Thank you. That was one of my, when I was devising this, again, based upon population, not registered voters, I was considering a third precinct to do exactly that. Again, with the registered voters, it may not be possible. The other thing to consider is if you want it, just like there's other, in Ward 2, non-Villanova students perhaps coming onto campus to vote, if you go east of the Blue Route, the one section east of the Blue Route has about 140 population. So if it's problematic getting registered voters for that one little chunk that you're speaking of, you might be able to get it by adding on everybody east of the Blue Route and still maintain what you'd like to do. But knowing what Villanova issues are and having all Villanova students vote in roughly the same place, I would be in favor of that. And if you have to move it a little to even to the Blue Route, I think that would be a good idea. So thank you.
Ward 4. I would be interested to check in with Jim, and if Lisa will still take our calls, hear what Representative Borowski has to say. But I think that the change looks good to me.
I would be for the maintain myself, keeping just the 2 precincts. They both vote at the same place anyway. I think if you do change, all 3 are going to vote at the same place. I don't think crowds are really an issue, so why have more precincts?
Okay.
I don't know. I would agree that asking Jim and...
My feelings are not strong. I can go with maintain. Need a tiebreaker.
I would agree. I'm not a big fan of 3 precincts. So, everything that was said, if we could do it in 2 and it's not changing anything, we should stick with the 2.
Okay. Moving to 5, I'd suggest since 5 isn't changing at all, we should probably just leave it.
I agree.
For 6, I'd probably change it. The first one just looks a little wonky to me, but I'll be guided by you guys.
I'd prefer to keep, to maintain, especially if we can have a voting location in the same place for both precincts.
Makes sense to me. Okay, keep it.
Sounds good.
Ward 7, I'd push for the Villanova 3rd precinct in Ward 7.
Me too. And then that precinct would also vote at the Mullins Center. That way, if somebody's registered in the wrong place, the judge of elections, there is a way that for one registration period, you can vote. You just have to fill out a form. And that way, their judge of elections will be right there and able to do that for a voter. You can only do it once, and then you have to change your registration to where you really are. But if you move, you can vote one more time at your old place, filling out this form.
Let's move on to polling places. And if I could, because we now only have about 14 minutes left, I want to move with a little bit more dispatch. We have with us a list of locations. My suggestion would be is instead of going through with the presentation, because we're familiar with these locations, my suggestion would be that we just kind of jump right into it, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I could summarize that we've heard about the ones that seem to be in question are in Ward 1. There are concerns about voting at the senior center in Ward, and this is based, I should preface this, the community conversation that was sent by Roberta Winters is something I looked at. So what I'm relaying here is information from that, not my own opinion. Ward 6, they were out, both of the precincts seem to be out, they would be now outside, so moving them back in again. And in Ward 2, there were some concerns, I think, about some of the school, like the elementary school and the parking, or the traffic in and out. But if everyone was moved to the high school, I don't think that would be an issue, although there were other suggestions made. So that would be like my summary version of sort of the high points of where people were potentially seeing some issues.
So I guess the main question for me is taking up the school issue. Because if we want to move away from schools completely, so they can say, and I assume it's a security issue is why the ruling changed that schools have to be closed during voting times?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a,
Yeah, sorry.
it's not a ruling, it has developed into a security concern. I'm sure if we went back, we'd find there was a time when polling took place and schools were in session. But I think that today's security issues that we face, we looked at several years ago trying to figure out how we could keep school open and have the polling. And especially at the high school, parking became an issue to try to do both at the same time, and dismissals with buses and people having access then to the polls as well. So yes, it's a security issue and it's a parking issue. It's all of those things.
Got it, because we now, at least in 2, have moved Radnor Elementary School to the Mullen Center. And so it's just the high school that's a concern there, and then the ITH.
And so with the schools, do we already have the calendar for 2020, it'd be 2023, 24? So is that calendar already created where you have those days blocked off?
No, so it's not been created yet. So we actually have a calendar committee where we invited in parents, administrators, teachers to be part of a committee that started meeting this fall. That committee is also looking at adding holidays such as Eid and Diwali and others. So as that committee, that's one of the reasons why I'm here, as that committee has looked, every day has started to count, and the polling days are 2 of those days that we've looked at and said, boy, what if we could hold school on those 2 days? I'm not saying it's out of the question that we could hold school, on election day. It depends on the building, it depends on the security, it depends on, we looked at it, a few years ago, tried to figure it out, and there was just a lot of obstacles. There's no ruling that says we can't, it's just we haven't been able to overcome those obstacles. Maybe in the future we could.
I think Radnor High School, so it sounds like Ward 1. Do you want to just go in order?
Sure.
So Ward 1, the senior center, the issue was parking, I think? Is that what I recall from Roberta's letter?
Yeah.
And the committee minutes?
I have enormous respect for Roberta, enough I'm going to call her Roberta instead of Miss Winters. I don't see a parking problem there myself. It also shares a parking lot with the Wayne Presbyterian Church, and neither she nor anyone else that I know of has complained about the parking at Wayne Press. It's really valuable to me that people can walk from one to the other when they show up at the wrong place, which happens all the time. It happens a couple of times per election, not all the time. But it's valuable that if you're in the wrong place, you don't have to get in your car and drive somewhere else. And also, I just do not like the suggestion of going to Valley Forge Military Academy. I have tremendous respect for the work that they do there, but I think there are a lot of people for whom going to a military academy to vote is going to be troublesome for any number of different reasons. So I would really push back on that.
And walking to Valley Forge Military Academy is really difficult. The windy road there is scary.
It is, and I'm not sure that they actually have more parking. So my recommendation would be to keep the senior center and the Presbyterian Church, if they'll continue to have us. I think we have a public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, a couple comments based upon Ken's concerns. We had a little discussion there. In some ways, it is an all or nothing. If you have any of the schools being used, then they typically are going to shut down all of them. So it's not like it's okay. We're only using 1 or 2, is the case. And then a quick question for Amanda. Then I'll get on to the polling. With the prevalence of mail-in voting being used and ballots being dropped off, is there a lot more latitude for the 1,200 where precincts could even be more consolidated? Because I imagine those rules were written back when so many people were voting in person. So I didn't know if there was if at the state level there's been any thoughts about people really doing consolidation and going well over the 1,200 in places where the in-person voting is minimal compared to some of the drop-offs. And then
Even before mail-in voting, I would say there was a lot of latitude about the size of precinct locations when I look at the size of precincts throughout the state. It's mostly the county that administers and makes the determination, in the Court of Common Pleas that'll be determining if the polling precincts are okay or not, and the state doesn't, I don't think really, it normally defers to the county's decision on this. So it would be sort of the county's comfortable with that or not.
I just bring that up in case some could even consolidate into one precinct based upon, because I don't know of any precinct right now that's really overwhelmed at any given time per se. So it's food for thought. Back to the actual polling places, I had made recommendations for Ward 3, but I'm looking in thinking that, again, if they can consolidate, I mean, Wayne Presbyterian Church, which is now out of Ward 1, because that's actually in Ward 3 now, in terms of, Jackie, you talked about people walking, because that area from north of Lancaster, from North Wayne to, what is it over Shimoni? I forget what the other boundary is. You know, those folks might be able to walk to that, if that would be an alternate. If Ward 1 could get down to 2 polling places, then one of the Ward 3 polling places could be perhaps Wayne Presbyterian Church and the library or something like that. And
Ward 1 could get down to 1 polling place.
The current, because I'm looking at Ward 1.
We're not going to have the third precinct.
Okay,
So that's
yes,
not
if you get down, so maybe my prior comments are more relevant if you get down to 1 and then do that. But, so Wayne Presbyterian could actually fit to go to either ward depending upon what made sense, particularly if we're trying not to use the school. And when we get to Ward 3, I've expressed my concerns about Sulpicio, but the library would certainly be for Ward 3. But I'll sit down now. I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Want to do Ward 2?
Sure. So the issue, the 2-2 is now moving to Villanova.
Yes.
So Radnor, so it's getting easier. I haven't thought about Ithan yet, but so if we could find someplace other than Radnor High School, or if we could make that downstairs area secure. I mean, the voters go, this past voting, we voted upstairs in the lobby, but in the past, all of the 26 years, other than this year, that I voted in 2-1, it has been downstairs. It doesn't address the parking issue, but I think you could make it secure. I mean, it's an area no one needs to be walking around the school or even down the hall further than that first room. Otherwise, we have to find a new place, which we could.
With the high school was when we did have the polling, so we had construction, so we moved it this year up to the lobby because of the construction.
That's why. I wonder, it was nice, actually.
Yes, yeah, but even if we used just that spot, it was the parking issue then. The high school's biggest challenges were so limited on parking, so to have polling in school and the security of trying to close that off, because there are classes that, exist down there.
You know, I've never had problems getting parking as a voter, but I'm not the staff, so who can't park in their usual spot.
Correct, and we've had, at least all the 6 years I've been here, we've always been closed on election day, so parking hasn't been an issue.
No, but the 20 years that I voted before that, it was never an issue. You know, they would block off 6 spaces that say voter only, and everything else would be used by the school. And that seemed to work. The poll workers would kind of have to find, because they're there all day, would have to be more inventive, but. I know there was some suggestion of other places, so we should at least think about that.
How would you feel, question aimed 2 different directions, how would you feel about the Inn at Villanova?
The Inn at Villanova is further away for most people, I think. I think St. Martin's might be easier. It has a huge parking lot. I don't know if they would be amenable, but it's a suggestion here. I don't think Penn Medicine's going to go for it myself, but I could ask them. I don't think they'll go for it. It's too, especially with all the infection and stuff that right now, this climate, they're not going to go for it. I wouldn't mind the Inn at Villanova. I don't know what the parking is like there. I've only been there a couple of times, and it's always been dark.
It's not as ample.
Are there a lot of staff that park there? Are there during that 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. or whatever, are there available spaces, I guess?
I'm reluctant to speak for the inn. I would be much more comfortable having conversation with the inn. But I would assume yes. I would assume the answer, to be conservative, yes, there are staff. Just recently I was there, and there is parking. There is parking, but it does fill up. And there are guests, too, to consider, guests that are parking there. I don't know how that would work for a polling place there.
Could I maybe suggest then that in advance of our next meeting as a Board of Commissioners, if you would be willing to interface with Ian and just ask them whether they have the appetite, and if we could reach it, if you could call St. Martin's. If we get a yes, then that gets us incrementally closer. I think Barron is right that we need to get out of all the schools in order for any of the schools to benefit. So we may not be able to do that, but let's keep plowing through the list and we'll see.
Sure. And this, just to be clear, this would be for precinct
2-1.
2-1. Okay. All right.
So
Thank
the
you.
non-Villanova,
Correct.
right, all the other 2-2, everyone in 2-2 would vote at Villanova.
That's right.
Even though there are some non-students.
Sure. Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 3. I see no suggestions. I know that Barron.
Well, we heard about the library.
They would have access to the library now.
Yeah, because the library is not being used now.
Okay.
I mean, it would, six is in the library?
6-1,
Yeah.
we would,
You're moving, presumably.
yeah, I think the idea is you'd want to vote in your ward, in your precinct, so there would be no reason that we would stay at the library.
Okay.
So 3-1 would go to the library and 3-2 would stay at St. Mary's, presumably?
It might be best to circle back to 3 because some of what happens there may depend on what you decide at other polling locations. Because like 3-2 is not in, St. Mary's is no longer in their precinct either. But like the Radnor Township, the building we're in today, is in 3-2, but they don't vote there, 6-2 votes there.
And now,
And there was-
6-2 used to
Or
vote,
used to vote there.
used to vote there. We don't, oh, yeah, we vote here now.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I thought you meant, I was going,
Yeah,
I was
sorry.
already jumping to the middle school.
Yep.
Um,
So you may want to circle back to that one because what you decide in other may impact that.
So you're saying potentially 3-1 would be at the library and 3-2 would be here?
Yes, yes. If people are okay, the concerns raised with coming here because the police are located here as well. So in the community conversation that happened in 2019, that was just raised as a possible, how people would feel about that. But
But to a point that was made earlier, if the schools are used to have both voting sites within a block of each other, the library and the middle school would make sense.
Let's hear what you've got to say, ma'am.
I have a question about, are you talking about, when you say the library, are you talking about the Wayne Library? Because currently it doesn't have any parking.
That's true.
It does
So,
not.
I mean, is it going to have parking in May?
Yeah, they'll be able to pave it as soon as it's warm enough in the spring. So they should get,
But how many parking places, when they pave it, will it have? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
How many parking places will the library have when it is paved? Because it never had enough parking.
Well, it's always had enough parking for Election Day. We've never had a parking issue. But more importantly, if it's being used for the third ward, you're going to get foot traffic. So you're going to have more people walking to the library than you are going to have driving.
Theoretically, yes.
but it's a good point. Thank you.
But, yeah.
But presumably it should, that South Wayne lot should be paved by May. Fingers crossed.
And we just held an election with it under construction, and it went smoothly. I mean, there were no issues with parking. People, I mean, they were parking on the street. I didn't hear anyone complaining.
We managed the book sale too. So
Let's look at Ward 4 if we could. Of the list of alternatives, because both 4-1 and 2 are at Ithan Elementary, I would push back real hard on asking people to go and vote at a golf club or country club. I don't think that it's an inviting environment. I think there's a reason the statute encourages us to have public locations, and golf clubs and country clubs are kind of the exact opposite of that. I don't see virtue in pushing from our public schools to Notre Dame, which is not a public school, but it's still a school. I don't know what Ithan Portables is.
Not sure either. That's just what they mentioned. Was there portable, back a couple of years ago, I don't know if there were some portable locations on site or something, or I don't know. Do you know what that was?
There's modular.
There you go.
I think I wasn't on the committee, but I assume they're referring to the modular classrooms that exist at Ithan that will be removed as part of the construction project that's going to happen.
Got it. Yeah, we need additional suggestions for Ward 4. I'm happy to kick this out to the community. Ken, if you can think of other locations, you're obviously the one most affected by helping get us out of here, because I think we've got places to go for all of the other public schools. It's just Ithan Elementary that's the sticking point.
And no matter what, we're going to need it during construction.
Correct.
So, and
Unless
that's
we-
going to be a couple of years. I mean, that's not like one election cycle.
Anticipate breaking ground for at least, the quickest we would is 2 years, probably more like 3 years before we break ground.
Moira says with respect to Ward 5, 5-1 has been at St. Aloysius for years, and you won't pry me away from JCHAI for 5-2 exclamation point. They're not changing at all. She doesn't want to change. I suggest we keep
So
it.
they're listed backwards here? If that's what more, I trust.
Maybe it could be backwards. I could have made a mistake.
Yeah, I think that's backwards. I
Yeah.
could be wrong.
Doesn't matter. But
Yeah. They recently moved, I believe, to the JCHAI location. So,
Commissioner Abel, Ward 6.
Yep, appreciate it. As we've discussed, we will likely be moving out of both locations, 6-1, as we lose this area from the first precinct. And then 6-2 has been voting at the Township building for the last several years, nowhere near the ward or the precinct. And it's been a cause of many headaches as people try to drive over here. Of the options listed, I appreciate the representatives from the Civic Center here. I think it is an option, and one that we can talk about. I've had conversations with the Arts Center, and the board has said no to it being used as a polling site. Christ Church, I have not had conversations, but there's no sidewalks on Conestoga. It's not walkable. So to me, it's not an option that I would consider. I still think the best location would be Wayne Elementary for a couple reasons. One, it sits in the corner of the first precinct, but right on the border of the second precinct. It would get the most foot traffic. Even people who live across Ditmar Park in Ravenscliff can cross through the park and be able to access all the folks in West Wayne, on South Devon, Morningside, Calvarise, even down to Morris. That's a walkable area. And then to a point that was made earlier, if you end up in the 6-2, but you really vote in the 6-1, you're at the same location. Mm-hmm. So you're not going anywhere. You go 50 feet over and you'd still be able to vote. So I understand the concerns with having schools used. I think in the short term, if there are schools still being used, I would like to see how Wayne Elementary does. And then when, at some point, if we decide to go away from the schools, we can look at other options. But all the other options that are listed here would all be in the 6-2. So we don't even have an option in the 6-1 at the moment.
Do you have Chanticleer, or is that not in your ward?
That would be. That's right on the line. That might be the 4th ward.
Okay.
But that still would be 6-2.
True.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
That's okay,
just
Amanda.
one second, just a couple of the other benefits of Wayne Elementary. They have an elevator, so I can't tell you how important that is. Plenty of parking, not only parking lots, but for seniors, they have the loop where you can drive closer to the entryway. And then the school is surrounded by sidewalks.
Okay, I have a question, Jack. With the potential for a 6-3 precinct, would 6-3 from, I was trying to look at it, Amanda, would that include the Highland Avenue area?
I didn't look at I'd let Amanda comment on that. I didn't look
Yeah.
closely because, to me, 3 precincts just makes everything a little bit more difficult, not only from the neighbor perspective, but then you have to man the 3 precincts or find 3 locations.
Yes, I believe it would.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is because we talk about foot traffic, and I can give you my personal experience. The last couple of elections, I have been there at the RTCA and driven people who live on Highland Avenue who don't have transportation, and I have brought them here to vote. So it would be beneficial to have them be able to, particularly those seniors that we service, to come and be able to just walk over and vote.
That would be, so Highlands would be in, if we kept the precincts the same, they would be in 6-2. And then, fair point that it would be closer for the residents on Highland, but moving it from the Township building to a location like Wayne Elementary would also bring it much, much closer.
So we've had a request for the Civic Center. You're suggesting Wayne Elementary for both.
That would be my suggestion, and that's also based on a lot of conversations that I've had over the last 4 years of trying to get as many people walking to the voting, to the polls as possible.
If we do Wayne Elementary, that means that all of the other conversations about, trying to get it out of public schools basically are for naught.
Yeah, I agree, and it sounds like, at least for the next 2 years, Ithan Elementary is the optimal location for Ward 4 unless somebody says otherwise. So again, at least in the short term, Wayne Elementary makes sense, especially if it's being used if schools are being used in other locations.
Well, I think for the next 2 years, we're not going to have access to, or no, because you said it would take you 2 years to break ground on Ithan. So for the next 2 years, got it. Well, you might come back with really great locations. I think that the takeaway here might end up being we're struggling to find locations to switch off to, and if you could help us, that would enable us to meet your request.
But it's not just finding a location; it's finding a spot. And apologies to the superintendent here, but we've got great schools. So we've got ADA accessibility, we've got parking, we've got sidewalks. I mean, it meets a lot of the criteria where you want to invite and get as many people out to the polls as possible. So we're kind of a victim of our own success there.
Where is the Radnor Civic Center?
It's on Highland, right next to the, I guess it'd be right next to Fairview, which takes you into Odorisio Park.
Got it. So if we were going to do, so it looks like you do have Chanticleer. It's right in the middle of 6-2. The Civic Center would be in 6-1, I think. Is it 6-2 or is it 6-1?
Highland's in 6-2. Yep.
I've got the wrong map up. I'm trying to sort of superimpose the right streets in my head, and I'm clearly not doing a good job. Okay, well, you're
So
the-
as Amanda said, we can change polling places fairly easily later.
Yes. So you're not like locked in for life on this decision. It's
Yeah,
more
whereas the
difficult to
precinct
change
lines,
the
you're gonna be locked.
precinct lines is more challenging to change, but polling place locations,
Okay.
as I'm sure you saw here during COVID, even some temporarily changed just even for the one election.
Well, it's your ward, so I think that's going to be our suggestion. Ken, if you could come back to us with alternatives, I'd push for them, but at the moment, I hear what Commissioner Abel is saying. For 7, I just keep what they have now and add the Mullins Center for 7-3.
I know there was an issue with parking at Rosemont Plaza. I think that was also in Ms. Winter's letter. But,
It was.
yeah.
And there was also, I think at the end of I shouldn't say the end. I didn't stay till the end. At the last meeting, the portion I was involved in, there were some adamant comments about retaining the existing location as well. So there seems to be, as with anything, 2 sets of opinions.
Okay. We are 15 minutes over. I'm going to make a final call for public comment, and then we're going to break up, I think.
I just wanted to quick ask, with circling back to Ward 3, you're looking to remain with what's there? Are you looking to move 3-2 because Ward 6, you're looking to move out of the Township building? Are you looking to have 3-2 vote, change to vote at the Township building, or are you wanting it to remain at St. Mary's?
So for now, I'm going to recommend let's stay at St. Mary's.
Okay.
But let's, if I could ask you to specifically reach out to Commissioner Jones. I want to be sensitive to that. I know we're the small group. I know that we make recommendations. but
Yep.
I just don't have enough information one way or the other about whether that's a good location for Ward 3. I haven't heard anything that tells me that it's a good or a bad location for Ward 3.
Yep,
I think
that's
you should
fine.
stay in.
Just want to get clarity.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kim Cruz. I live on Garrett Avenue. I'm in 7-1, and I am fully in favor of keeping the polling location where it currently is. It is walkable. It is ADA compliant. It is in the public interest. I have never had a problem parking there. I typically walk, but when I have had to park, I have never had a parking problem. And I've been living in this township for over 27 years, so that's where I vote. Thank you.
Hi, Baron Gemmer, real quick back on Ward 3 since we're circling back to it. So Sulpicio Gym, we're going to substitute for the library, if I'm hearing correctly from that. And, you know, if you piss Ken off too much, he might just take Sulpicio away from us anyway. Maintenance of yeah. Your sarcasm is welcome. So St. Mary's, I guess, the Township building, while, you know, great parking, handicapped accessible, it doesn't have the walkability and it doesn't have the nearness to the other polling place, which is important, particularly if you change them up and people are only 2 blocks away from where they need to vote as opposed to going. So as much as this would be a great place, I don't think it would be appropriate there. So either keeping it St. Mary's or Radnor Middle School, if we're still, you know, able to use schools because they're the one, close all concept. And again, if something changes with the first ward where Wayne Presbyterian, which is in Ward 3, would be available or could be used as a 2 polling places for 2 different precincts, that would be another option too. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your willingness to look at different options. We appreciate it.
Hearing nothing else for the good of the order, thank you all.